Hey everybody, welcome back. We are back with another episode of The Shift with Gina. We've got a guest today. First time in a long time. I think the last guest I had was Mark Lobliner. It might have been a couple months ago. So, drum roll. We've got Lauren Chen in the house today.
Hi. I'm so happy to be here.
Yay. This is the first time we've ever actually recorded anything together, right?
Yeah, which is crazy because I've followed your stuff for a long time, known who you were, been a fan, and we've met previously, but this is the first time we've done content together. Yeah. Hopefully not the last.
Hopefully not the last, especially because we live so close.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, we share a babysitter.
Right.
And you live like less than 10 minutes away from me.
It's so close, which is really close. Crazy. And it's amazing. That's one of the things I love about Nashville. There are so many people who are, I guess, like-minded here in the same industry here. It's really exciting.
There's a lot of people who have moved here. I feel like it is a really nice sort of like conservative media hub here in the area. There's a lot of people who've moved here recently, and it still has kind of a small town vibe because Nashville's not that big. But last time I think I saw you was the summer this year.
Crazy busy.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, it's good, but I'm glad we're sitting down to do this. And yeah.
I still have that picture of my daughter with your huge dog.
Yes. Jelly Bean.
Jelly Bean. My daughter at the time still had the hair that stood straight up. And she put her head against Jelly Bean
so
and she loved her.
Yeah.
But anyway, welcome. Thanks for coming on today. I know you are super busy. You've got multiple channels on YouTube, right?
Yes. And I mean, I love talking about politics, but as I'm sure you're already experiencing, it's hard to grow when you're talking about things that YouTube is actively trying to censor or at the very least throttle. So I've been leaning into the entertainment kind of cultural aspect as well. And it's funny because there's actually a lot of overlap there just because politics is everywhere nowadays. So I find with the cultural stuff, it's almost a fun, more lighthearted way to sometimes touch upon the same issues, but in a way that's more accessible to people than just talking about elections.
Yeah, it's also, I don't know, it's kind of more exciting and interesting too. I wouldn't consider myself a movie buff, but like that's how people are like, oh, go on date nights with your husband. Like my husband and I, sometimes what we just love to do most is just finally sit down and watch a movie together.
Yeah.
And we have kind of been not rewatching for me because I haven't seen many of them, but we've been watching a lot of the Avengers movies because using our friend's Disney account, we're just kind of mooching off of. And I know that you've been doing quite a bit of content on things like Captain Marvel, and it's such even in the last several years, there's been such a big change in the way that these huge blockbuster movies are now being presented to the audiences. I mean, I remember like Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't know what year that first movie came out. It was like early 2010s, I think, right?
I don't know if it was that early. It's all a blur. I feel like there's been like 5 Marvel things going on, but
there's been a lot. But I just remember really enjoying Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah,
like
it was
the first
fun.
one. It was a really fun one. Okay, 2014. So about 10 years ago it came out. And I remember just thinking it was like a fun, it wasn't political in any way. There weren't big overtones that were super liberal or anything. And then now we're watching some of these newer Avengers movies and I'm like, this is really hard to watch.
Yeah.
It's painful. Like you cannot watch it without all of this messaging sort of being thrown at you. And I'm like, this is real. I can't do it anymore. And it's like there's so much to dissect now in these movies.
Right. And I think audiences are just growing tired of it because I talk about the political overtones in movies a lot, and I'll often hear from people, oh, you're being too sensitive, you're looking into things. Like, am I really? Or are the people who are behind these movies actually like self-identified activists who talk very openly about how they're trying to insert feminism into their films and I'm just noticing it?
Yeah.
But it's almost like you're the bad guy for picking it apart, even though there are activists who for like a decade before this were the ones who were trying to push to get this into movies,
right?
Which is now what we're seeing the fruits of. And so, I mean, it's almost a great opportunity for up and coming filmmakers or studios to try and capitalize on the audiences who are tired of it. I just hope that conservatives can make better movies because that, you know, there's a running joke how like, I mean, pure flick stuff isn't good. It's cheesy, it's corny.
Here's the thing about a lot of conservatives making films is that they're way too on the nose.
Yeah.
They don't know how to make art.
Right.
So anyone who has ever watched my channel or follows me online, they know that my favorite movie is Arrival. Have you ever seen Arrival?
Yeah.
With Amy Adams? It is a very pro-life movie. And it does not mean to be that way at all. It's not an overtly pro-life message. The message is just that A mother knows that her child is going to be born and suffer from a very rare disease and die at a very young age. And she sees her future, and she still chooses to have her child anyway, and to give that child life and to enjoy the precious moments in the child's short life that she has.
Right.
That's a very pro-life message. But the thing about when a lot of conservatives make these movies that try to like compete with the blockbuster Hollywood movies is that they just make it way too obvious. And it's not very good storytelling. It's just kind of like lecturing the audience.
It's almost like the conservative version of the woke stuff.
It's the opposite.
It's not better.
It doesn't tug on your heartstrings. It doesn't make you think. It's just like, this is what you should believe. And this is what's right. And that's not what moves people's hearts with storytelling.
Yeah.
And so I hope that we'll see in the next 5 to 10 years some better films because we need it.
Right. And I think that it all stems down to putting entertainment first, putting the story first. And then ideally, there's a good message that's kind of universal and timeless. But I feel like when you're too heavy handed, like you're saying, then it's more propaganda than entertainment, and it's not fun to watch.
Yeah. Yeah. And just like, okay, so we were talking before we started filming. I'll show you the trailer now, but there's a trailer that just was released on Netflix. It's called Civil War. And the idea is that there's a civil war in America. So I'm going to show you the trailer. It's about 2 minutes, and we'll throw it up here too so you guys can watch it as we're watching it. But this is kind of coming on the heels of that movie Leave the World Behind on Netflix, which I haven't watched yet. You haven't seen it either, right? But that's another movie that people are saying is subtle programming, and they're kind of like hinting to us what's going to happen in the future. And there are a lot of people now saying that Civil War does the same thing. Okay, so watch it and let me know what you think. We'll talk about it.
But here we are.
There's some kind of misunderstanding here. What? Well, you're American, okay? Okay. What kind of American are you? You don't know?
The Western forces will reach the White House on July 4th.
Oh my God.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, what are the first couple things that you see in that?
Okay, so the first thing that stood out to me is that California and Texas together are trying to... Okay, I think that may have been attempted, like, let's not make this left versus right. I don't know, like, what kind of reality that pairing would happen. Interesting. And I think it's also... I mean, I feel like that trailer, obviously the movie came out before everything October 7th, Israel. I don't want to get your channel, like, put into the YouTube gulag, but, highlighting like civilian airstrikes, I feel like they're trying to maybe capitalize on the current news cycle with that.
Right.
As well.
Yeah. I think the one, I'm a big fan of Jesse Plemons. Do you know that actor, the guy who was like, what kind of American are you?
Yeah.
I think he plays that sort of role so well. But when he said, what kind of American are you? I think they were trying to like
a racial thing,
make him a proud boy. Like it seemed like he was, you know what I mean? They were like positioning him to be that kind of character. And it's just, I forgot who said this, but someone commented on them. They were like, this is a lib's wet dream. This movie.
Well, I'd heard of this movie, but I hadn't actually seen the trailer, but it was like trending on Twitter when it was released. And I saw Tim Pool was also trending with it because it's kind of like a joke that Tim Pool often talks about civil war.
Right.
So a lot of people, I think, were tagging him in. It's like, hey, Tim, it's happening.
Yeah. I saw Nuance Bro.
Yeah.
He was like, Tim Cast, check it out.
Yeah.
But it's funny because it comes on the heels of Leave the World Behind. What's the premise of Leave the World Behind? It's like a cyber attack, right? That shuts down the world or something?
I think sends us into some sort of dystopian or something like that. And I think the viral clip is the black couple with, I think, the woman saying, like, don't trust people, especially white people. And from what I understand, the main white character in that film is a woman who is like kind of like subtly racist or anti-black. And so, yeah.
This is why it's like, the bar is set so low right now for movies that there's a huge opening. Like, just I think there are a lot of people, even regardless sometimes now of where you are in the political aisle, I think a lot of people are just yearning for the golden age of just good movies.
Right. And the thing is, most people, they watch movies just to be entertained, and there's nothing that sucks you out of a story more, for me at least, than a line like that. Like, oh, white people, or oh, she, her, like whatever nod it
Right.
is to the current political cycle. And it just makes me roll my eyes because you are so clearly inserting yourself as a writer into the screen. Like, I don't know how you can expect the audience to stay immersed in the story when you're basically like flashcard virtue signal, these are my political beliefs.
Yeah. Even with the show that was based on the game, the mushroom cordyceps one with
Last of Us.
The Last of Us. There was it could have been so good. There was so much of the show that was really good. But they like the third episode with Nick Offerman, actually, who plays a president in Civil War. The whole gay storyline like had nothing to do with the story. I was asking my husband, I was like, was any of this in the game? He was like, not from what I can remember.
Right.
They just had to insert an entire episode. We skipped over it because there's literally nothing that you miss by skipping that episode.
And if I recall correctly, even the people, or one of the people behind the show was bragging, like, I'm going to make them watch a gay romance. Like, I'm going to slip this in there so people have to watch it. It's like, why? Like, if from a filmmaker standpoint, your goal is to trick the audience, I mean, I'm sorry, but you're not coming at the entertainment perspective from a good faith standpoint.
Yeah, it doesn't
like, haha, I got you.
Yeah, like gotcha. It's like a huge gotcha. I don't know, it's insulting to audiences, really. And when you want to sit down and be entertained, a post-apocalyptic story is actually very entertaining. And there have been many post-apocalyptic movies or TV shows in the past that aren't overtly political. And I feel like they had such a good chance with The Last of Us to just make it like a universal theme of, oh my gosh, the world's being taken over by like cordyceps zombies. What are we going to do? I want to like avenge my daughter's death. And there's this girl here that is almost like my daughter again. And then they made the girl have like a lesbian storyline too.
Right. So I've seen the playthroughs of Last of Us. If I recall, that game was like exclusively on PlayStation, which I didn't have. Sorry. I was watching like at the time videos of other people playing it on YouTube. And I think she is kind of like gay in the game, but they made it a much bigger deal in the series. And even in The Last of Us, the second game focuses more on like her being gay, but obviously the people behind the HBO, I think it's HBO.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, they were like, no, we need to make this much more like front and center from the start, which is like I don't think it needed to be there, especially if you look at series like The Walking Dead. That was so universally loved for such a long time. I think because people are interested in the premise, post-apocalyptic, it's pretty cool. Yeah. I know The Last of Us, the series, had a lot of accolades, but I don't think it ever reached that same level of popularity as something more universal like Walking Dead or even Hunger Games, kind of dystopian thing, because it's like you're painting yourself into a niche corner when you do stuff like this.
Right. Speaking of the Hunger Games, I had read the books, but a long time ago, and my husband had never seen the movies. So a few weeks ago, we were like, let's watch the three of them. And I remember thinking to myself, this is a pretty universal story. You know, it's like, it very much is like good versus evil. They're not overtly political tones. And I miss the days when movies were like that. And even now with Disney, I was kind of looking at some of the movies that flopped this year with Disney, but then it sent me down a rabbit hole of movies just in the past several years that have flopped. And I forgot the name of it. The movie was something Red, but it was a story. This is a kid's cartoon from Disney where
Seeing Red, was that something like that? Yeah.
The girl had, I think, a lesbian storyline or something. And these are kids' movies that they're putting all these messages in now. And I'm like, so not only are we seeing it in adults' movies and sort of the entertainment that's made for adults, but now with all these kids and teenagers, they're having these movies shoved onto them with propaganda. And that's what really scares me, because now you have this younger generation where it's like, what's the percentage? Like over 35% or something of Gen Z now identifies as LGBT or something?
Well, and here's the thing. I've been talking about the cultural side of things, the culture war aspect of, I guess, politics for a long time. And what used to happen, especially like 6 years ago, was I would have all of these establishment, older conservatives, boomers, for lack of a better term, even if they're not like that specific age demographic, who would say, this isn't important. No one cares about this. Let's focus on real issues. Fast forward to today, those same people are asking themselves, why are 35% of Gen Z LGBT? Like, well, maybe it's because, you know, in Lightyear, there's not only a lesbian couple, but also like a lesbian adoption scene, or like, you know, surrogacy scene, however you want to call it. I mean, in Strange World, it was Disney Pixar's first actual like openly gay main character talking about his crush on this boy. Like,
yes.
This is in the entertainment, so we can't really be surprised when kids grow up and they're products of the entertainment, the school system, I mean the culture in general. This is it's very predictable.
Yeah, that's why it bothers me when people are like, this is the hill you choose to die on. This reminds me of the surrogacy stuff that's coming up now. In the past couple of years, we've seen Khloe Kardashian talk about surrogacy, Lance Bass, and how their surrogacy experiences were very disconnected. Obviously, because you buy a baby, you bring the baby home, baby doesn't know you, there's no connection.
Right. You don't know the baby either. It's strangers.
It's a very artificial way to bring a child into the world. And now with that YouTuber Shane Dawson, and when you see conservatives speak out against surrogacy, you see some other people on the right, they're like, is this really the hill you want to die on? I'm like,
it's a pretty good hill to die on, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good hill to die on, because I talked about this in my last episode, and the way that Michael Knowles puts it, I think he puts it in such a concise way. Surrogacy, IVF, and abortion are all in the same category because they treat human life as if it is a commodity and a product to be sold, bought, or even discarded of. And that is a really big hill to die on. And so we're seeing a lot of people now criticize us for saying, oh, you want to die on that hill. And then we're seeing the fruit of it come years later. And so I'm worried about what's going to happen with this surrogacy thing going really mainstream, with a lot of celebrities and influencers who are sharing their story online about purchasing babies. Like, it was just revealed that Shane and his husband, they discarded of 10 embryos.
Right.
And that's like, that's the same thing as an abortion. You know, that child has unique DNA, has its gender already revealed. And I remember when they were on YouTube bragging and joking about their 12 embryos, they were laughing about the fact that every one of the embryos has a barcode, and some were inferior to other embryos. And they were ranked like AA, AB, BB, and they were ranked in terms of like how viable the children were. And it's just a really sterile, backwards way to think about life. And I'm concerned about how that's gonna develop in the future.
No, absolutely. And I feel like the people who are saying that this isn't worth talking about, this is a losing battle, I mean, these are the same people who would happily have conservatives, pro-life people completely capitulate just to win an election. But in my opinion, what is the point of winning political elections if, when you're in power, if you have a voice to do something, you don't do it because it will make you unpopular with people who probably hate you anyway, but also it would essentially force you to renounce your own values. And I think it's a pretty good hill to die on to say that human beings cannot be bought and sold.
Yeah.
And it's standing essentially against human trafficking. And I've seen people say, well, if you're against surrogacy, you must be against adoption. And I think Ali Stuckey puts it very well. Adoption is an attempt to repair a broken situation. Right. Surrogacy is purposely creating one. And as a mother, I cannot imagine anything less humane than taking a newborn away from its mother right away. I mean, people have raised the point that with puppies, we give them 8 weeks with their mothers. With humans, we don't even do that. And there was this viral photo going around of Shane Dawson that he had shared of him cradling a newborn baby skin to skin. And it's very clear that this child is trying to latch onto his mother, who he will not grow up with, and presumably after that point will not see again. And you know, the left loves to I guess compare conservative states to like The Handmaid's Tale because we don't want abortion. Well, I mean, actually treating women as incubators, that is The Handmaid's Tale. Like that is what is dystopian about it. It's not that you can't kill your offspring, it's that you're essentially being treated as a rentable womb. To produce babies for these people. And never mind, like, I don't see how it's controversial to say that a child, whenever possible, should have a right to know its biological parents have a father and a mother. And, you know, for people to say like, oh, well, any two parents, right? It's like, well, again, you're purposefully creating this situation. This is not just like, we're talking about like, should these people be able to adopt? And even then, any situation where there is a non-biologically related male in the family or in the household, it will increase dramatically the likelihood of abuse, including sexual abuse. Like, it's just... We know what the stats are, but it's not popular to talk about, unfortunately.
And then whenever you bring up The Handmaid's Tale, the response that really drives me crazy is, but in The Handmaid's Tale, they were forced to be incubators. But it's different now because these women they consent to giving their child away. I'm like, this is the problem, is that's called consent-based morality. And that has really been a pillar of the left for a long time. As long as you consent to it, doesn't matter. As long as you consent to being in a throuple, as long as you consent to changing your gender, As long as you consent, it's fine. And like that can go a really, really long way.
Right.
As long as you consent to having sex on camera, as long as you consent to selling that tape to the whole world, it's totally fine.
Never mind the fact that the child has not consented. No one is
Exactly.
talking about the consent of the child who did not consent to, I guess, be created for the specific purpose of being taken from his or her mother.
Yeah.
Where's the consent there?
Yeah. And then when you hear Khloe Kardashian and Lance Bass, and there's another celebrity, I forgot who it is, but they came forward and told their stories about how difficult surrogacy was. And notice how they only talk about how difficult surrogacy was for them. It was really difficult for me to bond with my baby. It was really difficult for me to feel like that child was my own. And I'm like, do you hear yourself? If you think it's that hard for you,
Imagine the baby.
Imagine the baby.
Yeah.
You're a grown adult that you've been in the world for 30 something years. Like this is familiar to you. Imagine a newborn child. Like it's hard enough for a baby to adjust to the world with their own mommy when they have the smell of their mommy and they know the mommy's voice and laugh.
Her heartbeat, I mean, everything. Like basically the entire world that they've known for 9 months is taken from them.
Yeah.
And I mean, even with fathers, usually they say that having the dad speak to mom's belly familiarizes the babies. Yeah. The baby with the dad, that's not there either. So because it's not like as if the two people who are, I guess, renting out the surrogate are there with them throughout their pregnancy. So it's really just throwing these babies into a situation where they have no real way to be comforted.
Yeah. And then they'll say, oh, well, that Khloe Kardashian's baby is hers. It's not the surrogate's. It's not biologically related to the surrogate. And I'm like, you think the child knows that? When there's so much about motherhood, I'm sure you experienced it too when you were pregnant. There's so much about pregnancy that science can't explain.
Right.
The intimacy of the relationship that you develop with your own child in the womb, all of these connections, the neurological and physiological connections that you develop with this child, that happens even if the surrogate is not biologically related to the child. They develop a relationship for 9 months. That's the only human being that child knows. You think Khloe Kardashian's son knew, okay, this is my real mom.
Right. Not the person that I was growing in for 9 months who, we shared sustenance, we shared an immune system, we, co-regulated. No, it's absolutely crazy to expect us to put the comfort, the needs, and the convenience of these adults before children, before infants, actual babies. But that is exactly what we're doing as a society. And, people like Michael Knowles have stated very well, like you're not entitled to a child.
No.
And I think that's something that in an age of convenience and just me, I can buy whatever I want. A lot of people have that mentality.
Yeah, that's so true. And look, I always feel bad for a couple, man and wife, that are not able to have children due to infertility.
Yeah.
And I hate that inevitably whenever you talk about surrogacy and how we oppose surrogacy on moral grounds, they'll always respond and say, oh, so you think that infertile couples, a woman shouldn't be able to have children? That's not what we're saying. But what we are saying is that you're not just entitled to a child because you want one. It's not a handbag. It's not like, something that you want to purchase. This is a human life. And I also think this is tied very closely to how quickly our society and our conventional medical system is willing to diagnose infertility. I think that there's a lot of incentive for medical doctors and medical providers to diagnose women with infertility like that, because you know what the medical definition of infertility is? It's just that you've been trying to get pregnant for a year and you haven't been successful. That's it.
Right.
So there's no test that you have to run to show that you're for a doctor to tell you you're infertile. All it has to be is that you've been trying for a year and you've been unsuccessful. Okay, so let's say a woman has been trying for a year to get pregnant, but she hasn't changed her lifestyle or diet or fixed the endocrine disruptors that she's been putting into her body for a very long time. There are so many women I know more women who have been diagnosed as infertile who have been able to have children than women who have been diagnosed as infertile and haven't been able to have children.
Interesting.
Because I think the medical system wants women to think they're infertile. Number one, because they get tons of money if that woman chooses to do IVF or surrogacy, or even if she tries to freeze her eggs. Like, you become a money bag to the medical system if you are infertile. And so I think even tied into this, the surrogacy industry makes you think that so many women out there are just infertile and that's the end of it and they can't have babies any other way. But I don't think that's true. I think that we need to be asking the question of, okay, let's talk about these couples, husbands and wives who are infertile. Let's talk about, is there something going on with the husband? We know there's low testosterone. That's been a raging issue for so long
Dropping
now.
sperm counts.
Yeah. And there are ways to increase your sperm count. There are ways to increase your fertility as both a man and a woman. But instead of asking these questions, we're just automatically reverting to essentially child abuse. Okay, well, that couple's infertile, so let's just let them, make a baby via IVF and buy a child. And it's just, it's very sterile. And it makes me concerned because I think that we're going to see infertility rates rise even higher in the next 10 to 15 years. And surrogacy is just going to be thrown at them very quickly.
And I think it's almost representative of the problem I have with Western medicine in general, which is that everything needs to be diagnosed and there needs to be some sort of like drug band-aid put on it. Like you said, heaven forbid we actually look at root causes of problems that involve maybe changing our lifestyle or getting off of some of these drugs that they're shoving down our throats. No, it always has to be more and more and more. And even if you do manage to get pregnant naturally and you're carrying your own child, what I found is that with Western medicine, there's always another reason why you need more interventions. It's intervention on intervention on intervention. And I think the push toward IVF and surrogacy, it's just almost like another offshoot of that. And it's really dystopian.
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah. And that's really the heart of the medical system now, is that it doesn't get into the root cause. It's just Band-Aid. But speaking of pregnancy and birth, there was that viral photo of a guy who got a vasectomy.
Yes.
Vasectomies are like a hot topic right now.
I have seen vasectomy trends so often on my homepage for X over the past, I would say 2 years, but more and more frequently.
What is it? What's going on with vasectomies?
It's so strange. So there are several different groups that are promoting it, like affluent white liberals. They love vasectomies. Some use it as a virtue signal. Like, I'm not having any kids at all because climate change. Others, it's like, I want to be a dink and just buy things for the rest of my life. So I'm making myself into a genetic dead end. Others are just like, well, I've had 1 or 2 kids, so I for some reason need to celebrate the fact that I will forevermore be barren. But there have also been like some really extreme red pill people who are like, the best thing you can do is just vasectomy, so that way like a woman can't trap you or anything. Anti-family, all of it. And it's strange because it's really, I don't see non-Western places doing this. And even in Western countries, I only see white people really doing it. Especially, I feel like the richer you are, the more likely you are to be touting your vasectomy. It's like just genics to the max. It's very, very concerning.
It's weird.
It's really weird.
I thought it was a troll at first when I was seeing all of the manosphere guys online. Like they would make a list, how to be a real man in 2023. And like number 3 on the list was get a vasectomy. I thought it was someone who was doing a parody.
Right.
And I'm like, oh wait, no, these guys are serious. And then you click on their profiles and they're actually talking about how the most manly thing you can do is to neuter yourself,
which is, spoiler, not the case. And I know there might be some people, well, you can reverse it sometimes.
Yeah, not all the time.
But not all the time.
Not like in The Office. Have you seen The Office?
Snip, snap, yeah.
Snip, snap, snip, snap, snip, snap. You've no idea the physical toll the 3 vasectomies have on a person.
You don't want to do that.
Do you know how much emotional toll 3 vasectomies
takes on a man?
No, but seriously, I think also with vasectomies, this is kind of generally with any sort of medical procedure or pharmaceuticals, people don't like to talk about the side effects.
Yes.
People think that vasectomies have no side effects on men. Don't you think, like, if you do something that big of a deal to your reproductive system, obviously it's going to have effects on you as a man.
Yeah.
And they're not talking about that.
What we don't like to talk about is just humans are animals. And basically the main purpose of an animal is to reproduce. So it could be argued that our reproductive system, it's basically like it's at the core of our being, or at the very least, it's part of it. It's not just like this aside, like, no, it's part of us. That's why, women going on birth control, it's not just like, you get to have sex and I get pregnant and like maybe less periods. Like, no, this is a huge part of your body, of your system. And so it's not just like a switch you can flip or anything like that. Same goes for male vasectomies.
Yes.
Like, for our fertility is a huge part of our overall health. It's not just like an appendix thing, like, subsection B, like being able to reproduce. No, absolutely not.
Because with women, when you take the pill, especially for an extended period of time, it affects your mood, who you're attracted to, your metabolic function. It affects what you smell like. like it affects your sex drive. And if it affects all of that in a woman, imagine what it does for a man if he gets a vasectomy. So I'm seeing, so on the photo was like, we'll toss it up here so you guys can see it too. But it was a woman who was welcoming her husband home from a vasectomy. And I can't pull it up here. Maybe you can find it because I think you're the one who showed it to me. And she had all of this candy and stuff on the counter.
Trying to make it cutesy.
Trying to make it funny. Yeah, she was trying to crack all these jokes about how he's got like no nuts or something. And it was just like, maybe Josh Lacash posted it first because he always posts, he finds stuff like this and posts it. It was so sad.
Yeah. And yeah, it even says no more kids for me. Like, I don't know. It just, you're reveling in something that I don't think is like, aside from the health aspects of it, you're kind of, it's almost like you're celebrating I'm done with children. And obviously, you know, we can't, everyone is not able to have 10 kids or more, but it almost comes across as also anti-natalist, even though I'm pretty sure this couple has probably 2 children.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the donuts bag, it was covered, the DO was covered with no nuts.
Yeah. No so long swimmers for Swedish fish.
Oh yeah. No more kids. Snip, snip, hooray. Unlimited cream pies. That's disgusting. Shooting duds. I mean, it's not funny.
No.
I don't even know. But even like, okay, I have a family member who got a vasectomy because they had a son and then they were like, okay, let's take a break because, you know, they're not well off.
Right.
And he was at the time a police officer who was working night shifts. And so it was like tough enough for them to have one. She got pregnant accidentally and they had twin girls. And it was like a lot for them. So they were like, okay, I'm going to get a vasectomy. But even if you get a vasectomy, I don't understand why you would brag about it.
Right. That's what's strange too.
That's the weird part.
Yeah.
Like this guy says, okay, his name is Marshall. No more kids for me. My wife had the jokes when I got home from the doctor today. I'm like, okay, if you're going to get a vasectomy, like keep that to yourself, bro.
Right. Like,
I would be embarrassed.
Why celebrate? And this is just the latest viral post. It's not the only one by any means.
It's not isolated.
It's a trend. I have seen articles saying like, here's why you should get a vasectomy, the benefits of a vasectomy. And I think anytime we're trying to make a surgery, a medical procedure trendy, that's concerning. That's strange.
There has to be some kind of research behind how a vasectomy affects a man's masculinity.
Yeah.
There has to be. And if not, I'm going to ask my friend, he's a frequency medicine doctor, and he often treats patients who have come from the conventional medical system and struggle with a lot of like chronic issues. And I bet you he's treated like, I think at this point, thousands of patients. He's probably treated some men who have lingering chronic issues from a vasectomy. I should bring him on and ask him and see if he wants to do an episode because there's got to be something.
I wouldn't be surprised. And I mean, we know that like lower testosterone does have health implications for men. So, I mean, if you're giving yourself a vasectomy on purpose that you're going to live with for like decades more, I wouldn't be surprised if there's something.
I mean, that's exactly what they want, right? Is for men to become less masculine. Mm-hmm. And then they're putting a movie trailer of Civil War in front of us. I'm like, God forbid if we actually go to war, who's going to fight?
I mean, like everyone, like all the men have vasectomies or are non-binary. It's not looking good.
It's not looking good. And then, of course, at the same time, you have all the women who are like trying to be like men. It's that Gloria Steinem quote, we are becoming the men that we wanted to marry. Like when you hear that quote today, you think it's like, painfully true.
Right.
The women are becoming, because there was that other viral story from New York Post that you showed me. A woman's 38 and she wants to have kids and she blamed feminism.
Yeah. So if you guys haven't seen it yet, it's a really heartbreaking video where she's saying that she grew up listening to all these like women in her life saying like, you could have it all, or, you know, if you don't want kids, that's fine. Cause you know, girl boss, et cetera, et cetera. And she basically says, I want to have a word with you. Like, let me, what did you mean by that? Because she's 38 now. I think she's almost 39, single. And she's now realized, wait, maybe I do want kids. And that's heartbreaking. I know there were a lot of people who were saying like, yeah, like this is what you get, you know, just desserts. But there's almost like a generation of women out there who are going to be facing the same thing. And you can't get that time back.
No.
Which is so heartbreaking to think of. Like as a mom, I can't imagine what my life would be without my daughter.
Right.
It's just... And, you know, women more so than men are affected by this because obviously biological clock is a reality. But hey, that's something where also maybe they can be just like, oh, well, surrogacy IVF.
Exactly. That's another easy way for them to shuffle them into that industry. But it does make me sad when I see, I don't know, I think becoming a mom has like kind of softened me a bit.
Yeah.
Because probably like 5 years ago, I would have seen that and been like, well, that's what you get for making dumb choices. And you see a lot of these responses like, well, this is what you wanted, like deal with it. You made your bed, now lie in it. And I'm like, but you have to understand that the system has fed her propaganda since she was young. And I'm not saying she's a victim necessarily. I'm not saying that there's no responsibility, but I bought into that when I was younger. In my 20s, I bought into intersectional feminism. I bought into body positivity. I bought into women's rights via abortion, like reproductive rights. I bought into that when I was younger. And a lot of it is because I didn't grow up that way. My parents were normal, I mean, you can say conservative. They were just like normal Christian parents. I grew up in South Georgia. And so I didn't believe any of that stuff. And then I went to college, and college just in a lot of ways, it's designed to program you to believe something very, very different.
Right.
So that's when I started believing all these things in my 20s. It wasn't until my mid to late 20s that I was like, hold on a second. And I kind of came to these realizations. So I feel lucky that I came to these realizations before my fertility ran out. You know what I mean? And so, because I remember saying in my early to mid 20s, I never wanted to get married. Marriage was oppressive to women. What's the point of getting married? And so I see a lot of these women and I feel bad for them, because you see the light finally turning on in their head. And in most of these cases, they were programmed to think this way. So I don't think it's helpful or productive for us to be like, haha, you made your bed, now lie in it, because that's also not going to bring over people who are from the other side right now. They're going to be like, wow, they sound really mean, because it is kind of mean.
Yeah, it is mean. You're basically reveling in the fact that this person is coming out and talking about how her life is, I mean, I don't want to say ruined necessarily, but it's not going to be what she's hoping it could have been.
Yeah.
Which is, especially as a mother, trying to imagine yourself in that position, just absolutely heartbreaking. And I get what you're saying. And I think there's something to be said about the fact that there are some, especially coastal, liberal elitist women who are so surrounded by a certain mentality, a certain ideology, a certain peer group, where it's hard for them to even fathom that they're wrong.
Yeah.
They're so basically indoctrinated with the idea that, you don't really need kids. It's whatever. And if you do want kids, you can have a kid at 50. Yeah, sure. Why not? There will be men who will want to marry you because age is just, whatever. That once they're finally hit with reality, it's got to be earth shattering for them. Yeah. And I think what our approach needs to be is like, let's try to make sure this doesn't happen to other women, rather than just laughing at the ones who it has happened to.
Yeah.
But I mean, on the other side of that, I will say, like, I try to talk about this issue, and you do too. We are basically called like woman haters for doing it, even though we're trying to help people.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also not helpful, because it's not good for society to have a large group of women who don't want to have kids.
I think there was this stat that like 40% of women over the age of
45%.
Yeah, are going to be single and childless.
That's
insane.
By 2030, which is not that far away.
No.
So essentially half of women between the ages of 25 and 44 will be single and childless. That's not good for society. Let's just put women's happiness aside. We know that marriage and family and motherhood generally makes women happier and more fulfilled. Mm-hmm. But even aside from women's individual happiness, let's talk about what that's going to do to the state of American society. The decline of families, below birth replacement rate. We need the bedrock of any strong society is family. So if we want to change that, if we really want to prepare a better society for our children and our children's children, we shouldn't be like laughing at these stories and being like, ha, 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 ha. We should be doing everything we can to prevent other women from getting to that point.
Yeah.
Because it's not only about us. It's not only about them. It's about what's going to happen to future society. This is why again, motherhood has made me soft. But when I see women talk about their abortion regret stories.
Oh, those are heartbreaking. I will cry like every single one of those that I read.
My gosh.
It's heartbreaking.
It's awful. Mm-hmm. And there was this one, I'll never forget it. She's a pretty girl. I think someone sent me her TikTok. And she was crying and she said, does nobody ever talk about how hard an abortion is on a woman? Mm-hmm. And she said it had been like almost a year and she was still, and the comments are like, baby killer, you this is what you get. And I'm like, what are we doing
She's
here?
saying that she doesn't feel comfortable with it. Like this, I agree. And, some of the most vocal pro-life activists are women who themselves have been through that.
Yes.
I'm talking about Abby Johnson, Kaya Jones, even Britney Spears recently, her book. She came out and talked about how she did have an abortion after she got pregnant with Justin Timberlake. And we see, I'm not saying that's the only thing contributing to her mental health struggles, but, it is something that wears on a woman. And I don't think it's helpful to when a woman realizes this and is struggling with it and she understands that this was a mistake, to laugh at her. Like, these are the people we need to say, like, yes, you know what? This is exactly why we fight so hard to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else.
Yes. And I think we need to be offering some healing to that person because here's the thing. If we're going to be seen as these sort of like laughing hyenas that are cruel and mean to people who are coming forward with their mistakes, we're not going to change anybody's minds. We're definitely not going to change anybody's hearts. Right. I mean, because here's the thing. A woman is twice as I think 2.5 times as likely to commit suicide after she has an abortion. Again, not good for society if women are having abortions and committing suicide. Not good for society, not good for her soul. I think we've become so hyper individualized. This is also a lot of times on the right too.
Right.
We've become so hyper individualized that we don't even think about the well-being of other people that may have different political opinions than us. Like if a woman is sharing her abortion regret story, we should be asking ourselves, what can we do to help, number one, prevent other women from getting to that point, and number two, helping her heal. Right. Because I think she looked like she was in her late 20s. She can still have kids, and I don't think we want to be those people that are like very, very unforgiving. I don't know. Again, maybe motherhood just made me soft. It breaks my heart when I see those women.
No, absolutely. And I think just from a Christian standpoint, we can't profess to be Christians and believe in an ultimate redemption and, hold people up like the Apostle Paul, while at the same time saying you've done this, it's irredeemable, you're unforgivable. I mean, aside from just like the political practicality of it, I don't think it's morally right to condemn someone when they're seeking repentance. They're trying to do better, be different. And I think you're right. Like, we are so focused as conservatives, like on like, oh, well, you made your bed, lie in it, that there's no room for grace or mercy.
Yeah.
And that's why I have so much respect for, crisis pregnancy centers who are not just saying like, we're going to take away the ability to get an abortion. We're saying, let us help you. You're dealing with an unplanned pregnancy. That's really hard. I can't imagine like what that must be like. A pregnancy is always scary. Can you imagine if you're not in a long-term relationship or marriage with the man who got you pregnant, if you're not financially sound? So those activists, those Christians, those just general good Samaritans, I think they are doing such good work, showing that this is actually also for women. Like, we're not just anti-abortion because of the child's life. We're also anti-abortion because it's not good for women, our well-being. And so we need to help them instead of just, I guess, condemn them or seemingly take away their options.
Yeah, the right has been weird lately about they're like proud that they have no compassion.
Yeah, it's
weird.
It's very strange.
And this is one of the reasons why I got a lot of flack for this. People like even called me a feminist for this. Do you remember that statistic that came out a few months ago that showed the high school boys were tracking extremely conservative, while at the same time high school girls were tracking extremely liberal?
Yes.
And it was like the way,
polarization.
Yes, the way that the graph separated. And I said, listen, this is one of many ways to prove that whatever the right is doing with women is not landing. It's not working. People were like, oh, this is how, feminists respond. I'm like, feminist? What are you talking like? If go to my page.
Right.
Like, I talk about how the world is harder on men today than it is for women. I talk about all these issues that affect men more than they affect women. We do live in a very gynocentric society. However, whatever the right is doing, it's not working with women. And what are we really trying to do here? What's our end goal? Is our end goal to make a better future for our kids and for our kids' kids? Because if that's the case, you would want to bring over as many people over to our side as possible. And the great thing about our side is we have truth on our side. We have morality on our side. So of course we want more people to come to our side. Is that our goal, or is our goal just to bash women and make them all seem like sluts and baby killers? And I don't know if we're going to have to edit that part out, but you get what I'm saying,
right.
And so I just think that in many ways, the right is really failing at converting women to come to our side. And I think largely that's because we're lacking a lot of compassion. And I don't think that's a flex. When I see the right almost brag about not having compassion. I'm like, weird flex, bro. Like, what is that going to do for us in the end? Number one, it's not Christian, like you said. And number two, it's very, very unproductive, and we're going to keep losing because of it.
Right. And I think, women are just one of the groups where we can see how bad the right is at messaging. And just basically trying to convert people. Like, this is why the right does not win by and large with especially single women. It's why we don't win with young people when we're telling them, well, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. You're the reason why society is bad. Meanwhile, everyone in charge is a boomer. These are people who have just come into the workforce, right? That's also why we don't win with minorities a lot of the time.
Yep.
Whether that be racial or religious minorities. So I don't like, I'm not even going to say I'm like a broad tent conservative, because generally that means like, let's just be the left, right?
Yeah.
But it's just about trying to meet people where they're at and say, like, what are the problems that concern you, and how can conservatism and right-wing policies work to help you be in a better place? Because a lot of times they can, right? If we're talking about like, the issue of abortion, it's not just you're a baby killer, blah, 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 blah. It's there's support available. It's not government support, but there are so many different Christian charities, like I said, crisis pregnancy centers, who will meet you and help you whatever you need, whether that's parenting classes, whether that's financial support, whether that's working to find someone to adopt, right? Yeah. There are absolutely people who are there for that. It's also about saying, hey, an ectopic pregnancy is not an abortion, so we're not trying to, just take away your health care. That's a myth. And, I think the red pill community is almost like they are basically the stereotype of what feminists think conservatives are, but they're not conservatives. But I think unless we manage to kind of like get the message out there that, hey, this is not what it means to be right wing, then that's also going to be very damaging.
Yeah. And we don't have to like go back on our values to be kind.
No, absolutely not.
Because if you think about it, like when Jesus walked the earth, he was talking to whores. He was talking to prostitutes. He wasn't like hanging out with them buddy. He was like going to tell them
he was
to
ministering
sin.
Them.
Yeah. He was telling sin no more. Like
right.
the longest conversation he ever had with anybody that's recorded in the Bible, at least, was with the Samaritan woman. She's also known as Saint Fatini in the Orthodox faith. And he had a long conversation with her, and he wasn't even supposed to be speaking to her. At that time, it was considered crazy for you as a man to be speaking to this Samaritan woman who had also been married like 5 times. And she was living with a man that wasn't her husband at the time. And she's at the well, and she's like shocked that this man would speak to her. And then he reveals that he's Christ. And then he tells her, go and sin no more. Like, he's telling these people that are currently living in sin that he's addressing them directly. He's kind, but he's also firm with them. He's like, you need to stop what you're doing. And I think what the right is so bad at is like, we don't even want to like talk to people on the left anymore. We want to like just shun them and call them names. We want to be cruel. And I'm like, but that's not the example that was set out for us.
Right. And because Christ did not just come to condemn, but also to save.
Yeah.
Right. And unless you have that helping hand at the same time, then you're not making any friends, you're not winning any hearts, and you're certainly not winning any elections.
Yeah, definitely not winning elections. I don't know. It's a tough thing to see, because a lot of times I see the right and I see all of the sort of mistakes that they're making, and part of me is like, we just deserve to lose.
Yeah.
We just suck.
It's really bad.
We're so bad at we're so bad at culture, number one.
Culture. And I mean, even when it comes to things like policy, I love low taxes. I mean, I cannot stress how much I hate taxes. I hate the government. But when we talk about things like, let's just say income inequality, like specifically inner city minorities, these are people who objectively have gotten a bad role a lot of. Like, if you're a kid who was born in the inner city, you one parent household, failing public school, crime in your neighborhood, objectively that sucks. So just saying work harder, that's not actually helpful. Same if you're a college student who's, I don't know how much in debt, never going to be able to buy a house in like a big city, saying like work harder doesn't help. So let's actually talk about things. Okay, let's make reducing college tuition costs a priority, which we can do through policy. It's actually it's a conservative thing to say, hey, if we stop subsidizing these colleges, they'll stop charging so much. If we make student loans harder to get, it'll actually bring down university costs. Right. If student debt wasn't separate from bankruptcy, right? There's so many things we could do that actually address the concern of high tuition costs without just being like a lib commie, like whatever, student loan forgiveness. I mean, it's the same thing with housing costs. Like, hey, let's talk about migration driving up the housing costs. Let's talk about regulations and all of these things. We can stick to our values, like you said, while still trying to help people and not just laughing at their problems.
It's like that screenshot that one of the Krasenstein brothers,
Those guys.
I know,
Yes.
those guys, they drive me crazy. I actually I think may have muted both of them, because what drives me nuts is when they do the engagement farming post and they're like, so Joe Biden did this at the White House. What are your thoughts? This happened. Thoughts? ? I'm like, just stop. It's so stupid. But they shared a screenshot of maybe on Fox News or CNN.
Yeah, something like that.
It was the median income of Black families, $17,000, and the median income of white families, $171,000. Which, first of all, I would like to see the median household income of like Asian families.
Right.
You know,
Yes.
that would not fit into the narrative, because you've seen too, there's plenty of data showing that Asian families make way more than white families do.
Right. And not even just Asian families. If you look at, I think specifically Nigerian immigrants,
Black
who are
immigrants.
also Black, they do extremely well in the US. And I doubt an actual racist who is actually anti-Black would look at a Black person from America, but treat them differently and worse than a Black person from Nigeria.
Yeah.
Like, that is just a very specific type of racist that I don't think exists.
And with the Black immigrants, they have much lower divorce rates,
Right.
higher marriage rates. They get way more college degrees,
Very low crime rates.
Even the way that they spend money, they spend a lot less money on like cars, shoes,
Yes.
getting their hair and nails done. It's like all of these differences. So it's number one, it's silly to just lump Black all together. But the screenshot that was shared is 17,000 median income for Black and 171,000. And when he shared that, a lot of people were trying to explain like why that is. You know, this isn't because of systemic racism, but just like you were saying, at the same time, it's okay to acknowledge that there are a lot of families in these inner cities that are just dealt a bad hand. Like, I have a family member who's a teacher at a public school in New York City, and she tells me so many stories. It's a lot of stories about how they're forced to pass these minorities through to the next grade and the next grade and the next grade, and they can't even read. So the system itself is like, they're putting a huge disadvantage on these kids. And I think it doesn't help, like you said, just be like, work harder. You have just as many opportunities. In a lot of cases, they really don't. Like this family member, she's married to my cousin, and my cousin he's not liberal. He's not like he's not a cultural conservative like we are, but in many cases, he's like, listen, a lot of you guys who commentate on these issues, like, he's like, I grew up in New York City. He was like, I've been here for a long time. Like, I grew up in Queens. Like, I know what a lot of these people go through, and it's really different than what you think it is. It's not just like they wake up and decide to be gangbangers. It's like they're dealt a really bad hand. And I think that we need to be better at asking ourselves, how can we change that?
Right. And it's almost, it's kind of hypocritical, because we love to talk about the failings of liberal policies, but at the same time, when people who are basically surrounded and trapped in those liberal policies, they're like, my life sucks, I don't know what to do. We're just like, well, responsibility. It's like, well, are the liberal policies really problematic and terrible, or are they not? Because if we acknowledge that they are, which of course they are, it also stands to reason that the people who grew up under them and maybe didn't even vote for them, right, that they have been kind of, I guess, victims of these terrible leftist policies, whether that be defund the police, so now your neighborhood is crime ridden, increasing welfare, which does incentivize things like out of wedlock marriage, which is not the child's fault by any means. And I mean, the statistics at a certain point, they speak for themselves about what kind of behavior is so much more likely if you're a child who's going to a broken school, you don't have your father there. It's a recipe for disaster, as we've seen in places like New York and like Chicago. So I don't think saying like, hey, how can we actually help these people through conservative policies, and we make it clear to them that this is what's going to change, this is what's going to be different. That's not like being the left. That's just being smart. That's being effective. That's being compassionate. I don't see why that's a bad thing.
Yeah, it's true compassion. And This is the reason that the left wins. It's because they pretend to be the ones with compassion, but their compassion is fake. It's not true compassion, because real compassion can only be rooted in truth, and their compassion is not rooted in truth at all. So I think, again, we are in a winning position because we have truth on our side and we have morality on our side. So I think we just need to be a little bit more compassionate. When Mark Lobliner, have you met him? Mm-mm. Okay, so he's here in the Nashville area. He's like really big bodybuilder guy. He has like his company's called Tiger Fitness or whatever. But anyway, you've probably seen him on Twitter. And when he was here a couple months ago, he was saying the same thing. He said one of the things that really bothers him is how conservatives respond to inner cities.
Right.
It's just like totally uncompassionate, because I think he had a really tough childhood growing up, and it was he worked hard and he got himself out of it, and he's very successful now, married with 3 kids. But a lot of cases, that's not available to a lot of kids who are growing up in inner cities. So I think we need to offer something a little bit better.
Right. And I think Trump, for all of his faults, he's pretty good at speaking to that segment of the population, because he's like, look, I'm going to get you jobs. The economy is going to be great. You're going to be able to be financially better off. That speaks to you. Like, you're going to have more money for your family. Let's talk about criminal justice system. Like, I am tough on crime, but at the same time, I believe that there should always be redemption. You should be able to, reassimilate to society. And, he's done a lot of work, especially with the war on drugs. I want to be clear. I am not even for decriminalization, but I just am of the belief that, having whatever amount of drugs on you, it should not be something where you're sent to this like prison where you just become even more radicalized over time. And there's like no redemption. That's on your record forever. I think we need to have a better path that makes it very clear this is not acceptable behavior, but also let's not push those people further out into the fringes of society. Yeah. And I think that's a balance that the American criminal justice system doesn't really have. I mean, like you see places like Portland and what's the other, Seattle, where it's just like open air intravenous drug users. And it's like, is this the compassionate thing to do? Like, I mean, surely there must be something better we can do. I mean, it's just, I was in Seattle this summer. We were going on a cruise, so we weren't like trying to stay there, but like human feces on the street is not just a meme. I was only there for like an hour. I saw things I don't even want to talk about.
Same in San Francisco. Yeah. It's not a meme, because I lived there 2017 to January 2020. My husband and I got out of San Francisco before the pandemic.
Right.
God, it was like a miracle we did. But I know it's a lot worse now, but even when I was living there, it's not a meme. These are not urban myths. Like we lived in the heart of the city. We would open our front door. Very commonly there was a drunk, homeless drug addict asleep on our front stoop. They always go through the trash on trash day, because they think there's going to be like something that they can sell or use. And if it rains, it turns into like water trash, because they basically take out like everything in the trash bin, and they just like leave it all over the ground. If it gets wet, it's just like this huge pile of water trash. It's disgusting. And so you look at these places. Are a lot of cities in Canada like this? I always wonder, like...
So previously, no. And the thing is, like, what frustrates me about Americans is that oftentimes when I like criticize places like San Francisco or New York for crime, homelessness, or drug addicts, they'll be like, well, that's just a big city. It's like, no, it's not. To be clear, no, it's not. Like Hong Kong, huge city, not like this. Singapore, huge city, not like this. Shanghai, huge city, not even like back when I was living there, not even really developed, still not like this. So these are problems that are very specific to a certain set of policies that are not innate to cities. And it's funny because speaking of San Francisco, a while ago, I did a video about just the terrible homeless situation there, drug addicts. And I basically was trying to say, like, there's a lot of aid going to these homeless people. It's not a question of money. I think it's like how much money per homeless person San Francisco is spending. And it's like, there should be, I guess, conditions on this. Like, if you want aid, it has to come with a treatment program, right? If you are a homeless person, I mean, there needs to be some sort of work requirement that could even be bettering your community. And I remember there was this one liberal commenter who was like incensed, like, you think you would make homeless people sweep the streets? It's like, yeah, actually I would. Yeah. I would. The streets would be cleaner. They would be employed. Like, I don't see why paying some government employee to do it is better than the person who you were directly trying to help get back on their feet. Right. I mean, there are things we could do to help the homeless situation that's not just throwing money via needles and drug kits at them.
Yeah. They get free everything. I mean, in San Francisco, the homeless people are empowered. Yeah. I remember when I first moved there, I felt bad for the homeless guys. Every person I tried to give food to, they were like, what is it? I was like, what do you mean? It's food?
Yeah.
I was like, it's leftover pizza. They're like, what kind of pizza? And they will reject it if it's not food that they like, because they get so much free shit.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. I'm like, this is what I mean. That's fake compassion. Giving them free needles, giving them free dog food, giving them the freedom to defecate on the street and urinate everywhere. Like, that's not compassion. It's not doing good for anybody. It's disgusting.
Right. It's not doing good for them, and it's certainly not doing good for society, their neighborhood. So who's it helping?
It's so gross. Wow, we went for an hour. Yeah, we went for an hour because we started about an hour ago. That was great. Thank you for coming on, Lauren.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I mean, and I'm going to be doing streams on my channel as well. I'd love to have you on.
Yeah. So tell everyone what your channels are right now.
Sure. So I'm on my main channel, which covers, I guess, politics and current events, is just Lauren Chen, my name. And then Mediaholic, I'm actually posting there more. It's my pop culture kind of entertainment focused channel. And you can find me as well on Twitter and Instagram at the Lauren Chen.
Yeah, that's fun. I want to start doing more entertainment content.
It is fun.
Yeah.
But you would think that, if I'm kind of focusing more on entertainment stuff, maybe it'll be less controversial. People will be less angry. No. Oh my gosh, no. There are some people who are very passionate about their fandoms. Let's just say that. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Well, thanks, Lauren. Thanks, guys, for listening. Don't forget to follow Lauren if you don't already. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thanks.